Cool. So yeah, a little bit about Access Sport before we get started with the webinar. For anyone that hasn't heard of us before, we are a national charity and our main aim is to help community sports clubs across the UK support young people so that no one's excluded from the transformational benefits of community sport. The benefits we focus on are physical and mental health and well-being, personal development, sense of belonging, and community engagement. Excuse me, give me 1 second. We're a national charity and we work with clubs from a range of different sports, and clubs are offered training opportunities like this to attend events and webinars. And that's where this webinar is so key, because it's being hosted by our Inclusive Club Network, which every club that works with us is invited to join, and then they can benefit from a range of different opportunities, resources, support, additional support from our Access Sport team. And I can see a few familiar faces on this webinar and some new ones, so thank you so much for joining us. Like I said, the Inclusive Club Network is who is hosting this webinar today. For anyone that hasn't heard of the network before, we are a national network, just like Access Sport is a national charity, and we're made up of clubs and community organisations that have worked with Access Sport or have some sort of connection to us. And it's a real community of like-minded people. We host webinars like this, we host in-person events, we offer resources and other opportunities so that when clubs have stopped their really intense club development support with us, they can still stay engaged, stay in touch with our staff, and really become part of the Access Sport family. We've got loads of events coming up in 2025 that will share in the chat and in a follow-up email after today's event. So if you'd like to be part of the network, I'll share the link to join and we'd love to have you on board. I'm now going to hand over to my co-host for the day, which is Sarah Jones. So yeah, thanks everyone.
Thanks, Shanna. And just to echo kind of what Shanna said before, thank you so much to everybody that's joined. This is a really important topic. It's a topic that's really close to my heart as well. So I'm really kind of excited to share some of the insights that we have and kind of get you all on board with supporting young carers. So today's workshop, it simply is just sorry, my words completely failed me then. Simply just to raise some awareness of young carers kind of within community sport. If you work for an organisation that engages young people, which most of you in this room do, you will be working with young carers directly or indirectly. And I know, kind of looking at some of the sign-ups, I know that we do have a couple of people that have joined us who work for young carers services. So as Shanna said before, this is a really informal webinar. Please feel free to kind of use the chat function, use the hand function if you do want to add any context, particularly for those people who, if you have questions or if you're working with young carers already and you have some on the ground insight, it'd be really useful to kind of share that with us. So we're kind of going to look at some of the questions that are on the screen at the moment within this webinar. So I really hope that at the end of this webinar, everybody will understand who a young carer is, what we actually mean by care and what those young people are doing, and what the impacts of that caring role are, both positive and negative, and why it's so important that we're having this webinar and we're raising this awareness and what our impact really is. Because everybody who works in community sport will be able to have an impact in kind of supporting and helping to identify young carers and signposting them to the places that they need to get that targeted support. So we're going to start with something that I don't think we've done before in a webinar, have we, Shanna? So we're going to see how this goes, but we're going to start with a bit of a quiz. So as Shanna said, you do need your phones for this. If you're going to have any kind of technical issues, you can use the chat function if you want to. Or again, if you do just want to kind of observe, then feel free to observe and kind of have a think about the answers and questions. I'm just going to swap over to the quiz, and you should have a QR code that's come up on your screen. If you want to give the QR code a scan, or you can head to slido.com and type in this code 2516423. And as you start joining, I should start seeing some names pop up on the screen. Again, no pressure if you don't want to take part. You can use the chat function or you can just observe. Although at the moment, Shanna, I can't see the chat, so I'm just trusting you.
I've got it up, Sarah, don't worry, I'll keep an eye.
Yeah, I've run out of space on my 2 desktops of having everything open that I need open, so yeah. I'll just give it a couple more minutes for people to join. If you are logged in on phone or laptop or anything like that, don't worry, you can just use the chat if you want to kind of pop answers in instead. I think we will get going. So there's only 4 questions, so we're not going to be here for too long. I appreciate that lots of people, this might be your kind of first introduction, I guess, to young carers. So please don't worry if you don't know the answer. This is purely kind of about us understanding some of the stats of young carers kind of in the UK. So first question. So currently, how many young carers under 18 are there estimated to be in the UK? So try and get your answer in. I think you do actually get extra points if you're quick with this as well, which, yeah, is not my strong suit. I usually spend too much time thinking about it. Okay, so we've got pretty split answer at the moment. So the answer is 1 million. So currently in the UK, it's estimated that there are 1 million young carers, and that equates to, 1 million carers under 18, sorry, and that equates to 10% of all young people. So if we think about that kind of practically, it's probably around at least 2 young carers in every single classroom in the UK. So there is a lot. But we also know that caring responsibilities continue beyond childhood, and there's at least 376,000 young adult carers between the ages of 16 to 25, and many of these actually continue caring into adulthood as well. So it's not just this, it stops at 25 and then you no longer have any responsibilities. I'm now 30 and I still would class myself as an adult carer, and I started way kind of into my infancy. So it is something that continues even past that kind of 18 age bracket. So next question. So we know that there's estimated to be 1 million. In January 2023, they were added as a category on the school census. How many young carers did UK schools identify this year in June 2024? Okay, so again, a bit of a split. So unfortunately, the answer is just around 54,000. So even though we've got really well-informed estimations from charities and local authorities across the UK of there being around 1 million, only 54,000 young carers were identified in schools this year. 79% of schools in the UK said they had no young carers in their school population. Now, we know that from loads of kind of research over the last few years that caring responsibilities have a significant impact on educational experiences and outcomes. So this gap in awareness and identification among schools really needs to improve, because it's really, really worrying that schools just don't have an idea of how many young people in their population actually have caring responsibilities. Next question. So how many young carers in the UK providing 50 hours or more of care per week? Okay. So most people going for 37,000 so far, and you are all correct. So when we think of like 50 hours a week, if we had a job where we were working 50 hours a week, it's obviously a very demanding full-time job. I'm so sure most of us here will have had those jobs where you're working kind of 50 hours a week, and it's exhausting. But if we combine that with also having to go to school or college, needing to socialise, also not being paid for those 50 hours, it kind of seems impossible that young people could actually be doing that much. And obviously something has to give, and it's usually education, or it's social opportunities, or it's enrichment opportunities. It is hard to believe, but it is happening, that young people are essentially having a full-time job of unpaid caring work at home for their family members or friends, and then still kind of being expected to go to school and get all of those enriching experiences that we want to provide young people with. Okay, so last question. What's the youngest age which we consider a child to be capable of providing care, and therefore they're identified as a young carer? I must say that this does differentiate across some local authorities, but most tend to have a certain age bracket. Okay, so most people have gone for 8, 40 of you have gone for 5. The answer is 5. So most local authorities now will identify, or charities will identify, a young carer of the minimum age of being 5 years old. And if you're new to understanding young carers' experiences, it can sometimes be quite difficult to envision, but there are children aged 5 who are providing care for parents and siblings at home. In 2021, it was identified that nearly 2,000 young carers aged 5 to 7 were providing 50 hours or more of care per week. Now, I fall into that category. I was providing care much younger than 5, but even I find it hard to comprehend. I've got a 6-year-old daughter who, you know, she'll help out with the dishwasher and she'll put her laundry away and stuff. I can't envision her having some of the responsibilities that I had at home. And because it's such a kind of abstract thing for us to really envision, it means that there's not much research into this area as well. It is growing. Plymouth University are currently undergoing a huge research project into early years and young carers. And the insight is definitely improving. I think someone just popped into, Rieti just popped into the chat that the youngest person identified in Scotland was 3. So it is growing, the kind of awareness of younger children, but we still don't really have a clear understanding of how many young children are providing care at home. So that concludes the quiz. We only had 4 questions. Rita, and you are at the top. Shana, you are second. So well done. I always find it a bit odd kind of celebrating those quizzes because, you know, it's actually really like poignant statistics. But anyway, we do have a couple of people that have answered those quickest and the right answers. So we're just going to pop back to the slide. Shana, could you give me a thumbs up if we've gone back to the right slide? Because
that's the right one.
Perfect. So we've kind of given a little bit of context to kind of young carers within that quiz, but I'm just going to add a little bit more background to that. I'm going to fill in some gaps. So when we say young carer, we're referring to a young person under the age of 25. When we say young carers, we say under 18, and then there's younger adult carers, which are kind of between 18 and 25, or 16 to 25, depending on where in the country they are. But ultimately, it's somebody under 25 who provides care to a family member or friend who has an illness, disability, a mental health problem, or a substance addiction. And it's important that I define that it's in the instance where the person who is being cared for would not be able to cope without their support. So, for example, lots of children at home will support with things like chores or sibling care, but they are a young carer when the person or people they are caring for are reliant on them. So if they help with household chores, and they weren't to do that, the household chores would not get done without their support, or the care that they give would not happen if they weren't there. So we've already said that kind of 1 in 5 young people, it was estimated that 1 in 5 children in the UK are young carers, which equates to kind of at least 2 in every single classroom. When we look at that across community sport, it is inevitable that most community clubs supporting young people will be engaging young carers, whether they know it or not, particularly if you are running sessions that are for disabled young people. If you're running any of our pan disability sessions, if you're running any kind of access sport supported disability inclusion sessions, you will have young carers involved in your community club. And we've already shared the insight into younger young carers. That's thousands of children across the UK who have caring responsibilities at home, right from the age 3, sometimes younger. And caring could be permanent. It could be something that a young carer is born into and they do for the entirety of their lives, particularly if it's in the case of caring for a disabled person like a parent or a sibling. Or it could be temporary. It could be something that they do for a period of time, and then that the person they're caring for either recovers from illness or something like that. So what do we actually mean by care? What do we mean when we say that? The care that a young person can give really varies, and it depends naturally on the person that they're caring for. It could be something low level and short term. It might be things like managing household tasks, like doing the shopping or the gardening, supporting with sibling care, changing nappies, doing feeding and things like that. But equally, it could include more complex tasks like administering medication or injections, supporting somebody with personal care like showering and dressing, providing emotional support like de-escalation strategies, or acting like a counsellor, or helping somebody to emotionally regulate. It really does vary over time, over age, over the amount of support that young person needs, that person who they're caring for needs. But the big point to make here is that regardless of the task, most young carers do these tasks often without supervision, without training, or without support. And they usually do them very well because they learn on the spot, they learn in the deep end. So when we're thinking about those young carers who are providing medical assistance, so providing injections or providing support with controlled medication, things like that, they're doing that without support, without supervision. If you worked in healthcare or you worked in the care sector or anything like that, you have to be trained in all of those things, but there are young people in this country that are doing that without support. Young people supporting with things like peg feeding or rescue medication or personal care, all of those things. So actually young carers have a fantastic skill set and they're really, really good at what they do, and often really, really independent. But that means that sometimes we don't notice that they're doing these things on their own and they're missing out on other things that would really benefit them. So what are some of the negative impacts of being a young parent? And I will say that I am going to share the positive impacts in a second, but I find it's really important that we do talk about them in this order. I think a lot of the narrative in previous young carer conversations, I guess, and certainly ones that I've been involved in when I was a young carer, when I was a lot younger, there was a lot of talk around bravery and resilience and all of the things that young carers are in terms of being fantastic young people. But sometimes that can cloud the things that they're missing out on. And I think it's really important that we understand some of the things that young carers miss out on, and they might not recognise that they're missing out until they're in adulthood or kind of like late teen years. So the first one obviously is education. There's a huge negative impact on a young person's educational attainment and outcomes. Recent research from My Time Young Carers found that young carers miss on average 27 school days per academic year due to caring responsibilities. And naturally, if they're not in school, they're not getting that support in school, they're going to struggle with exams. And then this also leads to them being 37% less likely to achieve a degree. And this will rise to 86% if they're caring for more than 35 hours per week. So actually, their caring responsibilities is affecting them, their educational outcomes long term, which then affects their employment outcomes as well. So it's a huge negative impact on somebody's ability to actually really fulfill their own potential. And when we marry that up with the fact that actually young carers are independent, they're really good at what they do, they have a fantastic skill set, they should have those opportunities that their non-caring peers have. So they're also less likely to have access to enrichment opportunities such as community sport, and that might be down to kind of having the time to do that, having the access to do that, having the financial capabilities to do that. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in our panel discussion later on as well. There's also noted negative impacts on a young carer's mental health. So caring often comes with high levels of emotional stress, and paired with all the other emotional challenges that come with just growing up in today's society, they're more likely to suffer with depression and anxiety and more likely to self-harm. Naturally, we currently have a crisis in terms of young persons' mental health anyway in this country, and having access to mental health services across the country. So this is a huge worry across young carers. And often, particularly for young carers that are providing care for a parent, there's a role reversal. So they'll be the person that looks after that parent and provides that emotional support, which means their own emotional needs become second. So then it might not be noticed that young carer is actually in need of support, or they might be in need, but they just have to put that other person first, or they naturally put that other person first because that's what they do as a young carer. And obviously they're at risk of exhaustion and fatigue, particularly if their caring responsibilities include physical tasks like manual handling. they're obviously at risk of kind of physical impact as well. And all of that stuff married together impacts their personal development. So we all know that our childhood experiences shape who we are as grown-ups and who we are and kind of how we move into adulthood. And if you've grown up consistently putting other people first, or you're in a role reversal situation, maybe you've been socially isolated due to your caring responsibilities, at some point, usually in early adulthood, those complex emotions around your identity and your self-esteem will start to emerge. It can really contribute to your mental health as an adult. For me, those emotions were most challenging at 2 instances: when I became a mum, which was a huge kind of change within my adulthood, and when my younger brother passed away a few years ago, who I'd cared for since he was born. And that those 2 things happened when I was beyond the bracket of a young adult carer. So I was, on paper, kind of expected to just deal with those things as an adult, but the challenges that I faced with those stemmed from my caring responsibilities at home. But we will talk about the positive impacts of being a young carer. I've already said a few times that young carers are fiercely independent. They are resourceful young people. I don't like the word resilient because sometimes what it's attached to, but they are really resilient young people, and they're able to cope with a lot of things that are thrown their way. Lots of young people have had experience in dealing with adult issues from really young age, so things like finances. Lots of young people of a young age will have managed kind of household finances and have a really rich understanding of financial kind of independence and things like that. They're also really, really caring people naturally, so they'll have a higher level of emotional maturity, usually from what they should have as their age. They sometimes be described as wise or a little beyond their years and stuff. And that is a real benefit, particularly when we consider that lots of young carers go on to work in caring facing roles in healthcare or nursing or doctoring. They have a fantastic skill set which match these roles and these sectors. So it's a natural trajectory for those young people to move into. But finally, young carers are often the best placed people to advocate for the people they care for. Even at a young age, they care for that parent or sibling day in, day out, and they know them the best. They know what they need. And we see this a lot in our community clubs. So lots of our clubs will run pan-disability sessions across our changing sports programmes. So we've got tries, we've got flyers, and to really make sure that those sessions are inclusive, we say to the club, allow kind of family members to attend, allow siblings to attend. What happens is that if we have a disabled young person attending, and this happened in the summer at one of our climbing clubs, a disabled young person attended alongside his non-disabled older sister, and she was a fantastic support kind of anchor for that young person. He only wanted to climb with her. He would only get on that wall if she was with him. And he was really, really anxious and really struggled with kind of her wanting to go and climb on her own. And in the end, she actually had to step away from that session because he just became too anxious and he wouldn't leave her side. Now, naturally, she is a fantastic kind of companion for her brother. She knows him the best. He feels the most comfortable around her. But also, she's then missing out on an opportunity to take part in a sport. And she actually said, I really, really enjoyed that session. I really want to do it again, but I'm going to have to sit with my little brother because he's a little bit upset. So actually, although they're best placed, we still need to see them as individuals as well, and as young people that deserve the same opportunity within our clubs and within our settings. So, current challenges. Why are we actually doing this webinar? Why is this work so important? So there's lots of challenges that we're currently facing, particularly in the UK. The first one is just identifying young carers. It's not always obvious. We've already heard some of the kind of the positive impacts of being a young carer, in that they are independent and they are able to do a lot of things themselves. And this means that they don't often ask for help. There's not these clear-cut signs that we would expect to see if a young person is struggling at home, because actually they're probably looking after themselves. There's also a huge lack of awareness still about around young carers, and of course that's kind of why we're sharing this webinar today. We've already heard that the sheer amount of schools that didn't report any young carers this year, and that lack of awareness only extends to other children's services too. There's also a lack of targeted support. So there's still no standardised training for professionals across the UK. Lots of kind of local authorities in the UK, or most local authorities, have to rely on charities or other external organisations. There's only a handful of local authorities that actually have an internal kind of young carers department. So actually, where we signpost those young people to is really varied depending on where you are in the country. And there's also all the intersectionality around being a young carer as well. It's often overlooked that their experiences are really multifaceted. And as much as we talk about intersectionality across disabled people and like ethnically diverse communities and all of the other kind of intersections or barriers that come in, young carers are also another intersection of that we need to consider. And actually the support that they need is going to be really reliant on all of those factors, not just the fact that they're a young carer. So what can we do within community sport? So I think, as we've said, it's really likely, based on the statistics, that our clubs will be working with young carers in some way. Whether you know it or not, whether they know it or not, we will be having young carers come to our community clubs. As a charity, we are working with them. We just don't know how much and to what extent at the moment. So I think we have to assume that we have young carers within our clubs, and we have to be open-minded and aware of that. And what we can do within our community settings, the biggest impact that we can have is raising awareness amongst our community teams, and also being able to signpost those young people or those families to the relevant services, or us connecting with those relevant services and just making them aware that we are here. And we're happy to kind of support young carers. We're happy to support their families and welcome them into our club. We still have some work to do with this in Access Sport. This is a really new area of work for us, and we're growing kind of with what we're able to offer to clubs. But essentially, we want to make sure that you are able to ask us questions. So if you have a young person in your club that you maybe suspect is a young carer or has told you that they have caring responsibilities, that you can come to us, you can say, what do I do? And what we'll probably say is, this is your local young carers service in your area. I'm going to connect you with them. Or it might be the local authority. Here's some resources if they know you're a young carer, or here's the local young carers representative who they already work with, so you can connect with them and see if there's anything you can do with your club. There's loads of stuff we can do. Generally, it's about us being able to signpost those young people to the right places, which are generally young carers services. So we're now going to move on to our Q&A. Just before we do, I'm just going to have a look through the chat. There's no questions or anything that have come up at the moment, is there, Sharna?
No, not just yet. But if anyone has anything that they want to jump off mute and ask just now, please go for it.
Hi, I'm Sarah. I put in the chat that I'm here in like two capacities really, because I'm welfare officer for a rugby club, but also I work in the Youth Justice Service. I've just picked up a new case that I'm managing within my job. She is a young carer. She's not registered as a young carer. I'm going to be looking at getting her registered. She's wanting to get back into football. Is there a way, do young carers support with them getting back into the sports and things, or do I need to find a local club that will support her?
My answer would be, I think it would depend on the barriers that she's facing. I think definitely find if she, did you say she is a young carer already and she's like, no.
Well, there's been some confusion and I obviously need to kind of look into it a little bit more. So by the sounds of it, she was registered as a young carer because she talked really fondly of like the day trips out and things that she got to go on when they had respite. She then started attending a Catholic school and it seemed to stop the engagement with the young carers. So I need to look into how that actually works as to whether she'll still be registered as a young carer or whether she's been taken off that as being registered now. But it's the financial situation that's preventing her from attending football now. I'm going to look and see if there's any like free resource out there for her to attend it. But yeah, it was whether the young carers would support with that rather than it being mere work capacity, if you like.
I think it depends on where you are in the country. I think because there's no standardized young carers like services or like framework at the moment, it's really varied on where you are. Like some young carers may have funding for that, some local authorities will have funding for that, some just wouldn't. Where are you in the country, or where is this young person based?
Leeds.
Leeds, okay. Yeah. Well, I think after that, and Ollie from My Time Young Carers is probably much better kind of place to answer that question. So I'll hand over to Holly in a second. But after that, let's have an email and we can see if we can support with any clubs that we know of in the area, because it might be that we actually support clubs to do that, or it might be that the Young Carers Service supports that. It will depend on what opportunities they've got. Holly, you've raised your hand, very polite. I'll just pass over to you if you've got any input.
Oh, hi everyone. Thank you for having me today. This is really, really wonderful what's going on at the moment, because at my time, we're actually building a 4th program to run alongside our other 3 programs that are quite embedded in the service at the moment, and it's called the Community Champion Program. And essentially what we aim to do is to offer training to of young carer awareness to community leaders, but it could be football associations, it could be food banks, churches, anywhere in the community where we feel like a young carer could be identified and there's those missed opportunities. So I've done a research piece recently. This isn't public, but I do feel like it's important to share with everyone on the chat at the moment. So we actually spoke to the young carers themselves. We spoke to the parents and guardians of our young carers, and I spoke to several community leaders. And our new research shows that 74% of young carers are already participating in clubs and societies outside of school. And yet 26% of the parents said that these community leaders, the teachers, they don't actually know that their child is a young carer. And then when we spoke to the young carers again, 91% of them said that their caring role hinders regular attendance at clubs or hampers their pursuit of a passion. So this raising awareness piece is just so vital, I believe, and I'm in full support. And I'd love to perhaps chew your ear off, Sarah, at another day about how we could collaborate with Access Sport in the future around this new program. But I just thought I wanted to share some of those statistics with you. The research paper is going to be published early January 2025. So I'll be sure to put that amongst the lot of you. But yeah, it's quite exciting, and thank you for sharing what you've shared so far today.
Oh, thank you, Holly. And I think both me and Shanna would probably agree this is what this webinar is for connecting people and like the kind of other organisations as well that are doing this. So let's drop each other an email after this and we'll definitely see, because I've known about My Time for ages, so I'm really excited that you're kind of here and we can continue this conversation. What I'm going to do now is continue with our Q&A. So I should have stopped sharing now. Have I stopped sharing, Shanna? I'm not.
I'm just going to spotlight you both.
Yeah. So I really want to introduce a young adult carer who is joining us for today. Rieta is here. So Rieta, do you want to introduce yourself, and then we'll kind of have a go of some questions?
Yeah, well, of course. So I'm Rieta. I'm based up in the north of Scotland, like the far north, and I grew up as a young carer for pretty much as long as I've known. However, I only got identified in the later years of high school. I care for both my mum and my dad for different reasons, both mental health and physical disability. So obviously that's had different impacts on how I've cared for both over the years. And I've taken part in sporting activities throughout high school, where I can obviously being a young carer. So yeah.
So thank you for introducing yourself. I've got a couple of questions that we're just going to have a discussion, but then I am going to open up the floor. So if anybody does have any questions that they would like to ask Rieta, or anything kind of to do with the topics that we've shared today, please pop them in the chat, or after these questions we'll have a bit of time to kind of come off mute as well. So firstly, do you want to tell us about your relationship with community sport? You said you'd kind of done stuff through high school, so just tell us about what that means to you.
Yeah. So during high school, I had the opportunity of doing kind of a dance group competition called Rock Challenge. It's a national thing, but we travelled down to Inverness, which was our closest city, to do it. And it was like an hour after school every week for pretty much the whole year. And that was my kind of opportunity to get away from my young carer role and kind of have some time for myself. But There was lots of mixed feelings at the time about doing it, and a lot of reasons sometimes where I couldn't have gone due to living rurally. And that often meant like if I decided to go because of transport issues, I would have been out the house from start of the school time to after the club, and then I'd have to wait for the bus home, which would have been like 7, 8 o'clock. And during that time is when I would have normally been helping out, doing young carer duties or cooking dinner or this or that or whatever. And that just kind of put a delay on everything then for the next week. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I think that we said this before, didn't we? That actually, even when, you know, we can look at it as there's extra barriers that young carers face. So you've already said, like, you know, there's the geographical barriers, there might be financial barriers. If we can remove them and then give the more kind of opportunities to access it logistically, there's still that huge sense of kind of guilt that follows you within that. So like you've said, it would delay the things that you would have to do, and when you've got that in your mind, how can you really be present in what you're doing? And I think, so we chatted about this before, didn't we? That actually that sense of, oh God, should I be doing this or should be at home, still stays with you. And I don't think that ever leaves, even when you go into adulthood, that you always have this kind of, can I really do something for myself? Can I really just sit and do nothing for a few hours, or should I have something to do?
Yeah.
So I think that's a really important thing to share, particularly for clubs, that those young carers that you do have, even if they are aware of that, they may be battling with some of those feelings and some of those kind of complex emotions around wanting to progress or wanting to continue in a sport. When we were chatting before, Rachel, you mentioned that there was somebody within sport or outreach that really was kind of really influential in your identification and your support network. So could you share a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so I don't know what her job role exactly was, but it was sort of an outreach worker of the High Life Highland, which is kind of a local community-based whole of Highlands organization that kind of helps run the gyms and swimming pools. They come into the schools and do activities for sport and such. But they then also do extended work of supporting students in schools in terms of if they're struggling with the education for various different reasons. I actually met her first through doing the dance group I did after school because she helped out with that. And it was through her that actually identified me as a young carer, and I was about maybe 15 or 16 at this point of time. So considering I started properly caring for my parents when I was 8 years old, that I can kind of actively remember caring for them. It's quite a long time in between that point where I was just kind of floating in terms of like what I was and not getting help and struggling with school because of my caring duties. But yeah, she helped me by getting me in contact with my local carers group, signposted other ways to help, and through them then I was able to join in other activities, other sporting opportunities, because we'd go out on respite trips to like adventure centres and all this sort of stuff, and it really, really helped actually.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a really powerful thing to share, in that, and I guess any coach within this call, anybody that works within community sport, anybody that has an awareness of a young carer could be the equivalent, could be that influential person that really changes a young person's experience. And I think it'd be really great to hear kind of what, you know, like you said just then, when you were kind of involved in that young carer service, even within that, some of the things that you were offered was an opportunity to go and take part in sport, like at adventure centres and things like that. So what kind of benefits do you feel community sport kind of provided you with, particularly as a young person and somebody who was caring at home? How did it really kind of help you outside of the person who kind of really helped you get the support that you needed?
It definitely helped, like stereotypically, like the self-esteem and confidence and all that side of it. But on a deeper level, it allowed me to connect more with like my peer group, because it gave me the opportunity to socialize with them, like outside of necessarily like an educational setting, even though it was an after schools club. So it made me feel like I was a child again, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
I didn't need to worry about being like the grown up in that situation.
Yeah, and you said you still dance now, don't you?
Yeah.
So it's definitely something that's like stuck with you, which is brilliant to hear. I think that that's the key, isn't it? That actually, when you're a young carer at home, or even when you're in school, you have this sense of grown-upness and kind of things that you must do, and that translates to education, where you do try hard and you do kind of put all of your effort into that, and you are driven. Whereas in sport, you do get the opportunity to be a little bit more free, I guess. I think that would be my experience of the very limited sport opportunities I had when I was a young carer. Is there any, and I'm just throwing in a rogue question here, but is there any kind of key messages that you would really like people to take from kind of this webinar? So obviously we have community coaches, we have volunteers, we have generally people who work with lots of young people, either directly in terms of working with young carers or indirectly. Is there any key messages that you, as somebody who has really rich lived experience, would like people to take away from today?
If you do know that someone's a young carer, I definitely would say try not to pity their position. Like obviously acknowledge where they are and what they are doing, but usually a lot of the time when young carers have the opportunity to leave and do an activity outside their role, that's their chance to be themselves.
I really like that. I think that not pity in that position is a really useful thing as well. There's a lot of, we hear so many statistics even that we've heard today, and some quite shocking statistics, really quite shocking things, particularly when we're thinking about younger people. You said you started caring at 8. Some of the things that maybe an 8-year-old would do if they're caring for parents, it can sometimes be, oh God, but actually that pity is wasted, doesn't go anywhere. Let's put that emotion into something that's useful and really use it for kind of positive change. So thank you for sharing that. I'm going to open up the floor now, if that's okay, which is always a bit of a scary moment, but I think I would hope that people have got some questions, and we've got a really unique opportunity to talk to a young person who is, I would say, probably a little bit closer to your lived experience than I am in terms of me being a little bit older. So I think it'd be really useful for people to kind of, if you're comfortable, be able to ask some questions about how they can better support young people within their clubs. So if anybody does have any questions that you want to pop in the chat, or equally, if you would like to come off mute or pop your hand up, however you would like to do it, it would be great to hear from some audience members, any thoughts or any questions.
I do actually have a question pertaining to the sport, and I'm actually moved by everything that I'm hearing. One of my gold medalists, he was homeless, and that was kind of his way of getting his family and his dad out of the situation, and now he's in the NFL. My question is, how many young carers have actually honed the sport and truly been successful within the sport while being a young carer?
I think my answer would be, I'm sorry, Maria, to go on.
No, you go ahead.
I don't actually know what the figure would be. I know of a couple of sports people and kind of like music stars that have been very open about their care and responsibilities. I know Holly has got a raised hand as well, so she may have an answer here. But I would say, given the right support, there's no reason why they can't reach their full potential, particularly around, like Rita was saying before, when those emotions around guilt and kind of the amount of time that you have to dedicate to a sport to actually really get to that performance stage, that requires a lot of dedication. And actually the time that a young carer has is a lot more limited than a non-caring young person, because they do have responsibilities. And even if we can give them that time, there's all the emotions that come with that, with not fulfilling expectations and things like that. So I wouldn't entirely know the exact statistic though. Rita, do you have anything to add? And then Holly, I'll come back to you if your hand's
I
still up.
know from like a personal experience, obviously dancing's not necessarily as not involved as other potential sports. But But over the years, I have been able to make a, say, semi-professional kind of part-time career out of my dancing. I do get paid to perform now, so it has given me that opportunity to expand more into kind of making it more of a kind of real life thing rather than just a hobby.
I love it. Anytime you get paid, you're a professional. Good deal.
Holly, your hand was up originally, but it's come down. So if you do have anything to add, please do.
Well, I do, yeah, sorry. I just wanted to say that actually one of our young carers down here in Dorset, he's just returned from South Africa as a powerlifting champion. He got 3 medals, and we are so unbelievably proud of him. He's only 16, and I think he's a sole carer for his mum. She's a single mum. And it's that collaboration at the end of the day. It really took an entire community to come together to make that happen, because there's a wonderful organization called West Howe Community Enterprises, which is essentially a community hub in an area of deprivation. And they all got together and fundraised for this kid to get the money to go. They raised over £3,000 for him so that he could go to South Africa to compete. But how proud that community is of that young carer, and then the morale boost that's then given him for the rest of his life, frankly, and the experience that he got to go to South Africa and compete. So it is possible, it really is, but it takes a village to raise a child, right? So it's about that collaboration at the end of the day, and that multi-partner working is what I wanted to add.
No, thank you for that, Holly. That's really nice insight, and that's an amazing story as well, that he's actually like had that support that's got him to that level. So that's wonderful to hear. Thank you for sharing. Any other questions from anybody else? Either in the chat. I've lost my chat box now that I opened up.
Sarah, I'll jump in. So Lisa's made a great comment about like the fact that we mentioned the transport barrier, and Lisa's club recently put on a program for the elderly where they arrange transport to eradicate that travel barrier. And obviously that would be an incredible thing for clubs to be able to implement for young carers. I think my question would be, from a practical point of view, and maybe for both of you, what do you think are some of the really simple things that clubs, especially community clubs, could do to make young carers feel more involved and really kind of foster that sense of belonging within a community club for young carers?
Retha, do you want to answer first this time?
Yeah. Well, sorry, words. Obviously, like I said, transport is and can be quite difficult. Even like living in a city, it could be needing to meet deadlines of times to get back to places or help with appointments and such. But even just putting on potential activities during, like, if it's during a school day, during lunchtime or the break time, so the kids are already in this location, it's not taking them extra time away from home. It kind of opens it up a bit more. I know it's not always possible, and you'd have to organize it with the schools and such and that, but
I think there's a couple of practical things definitely that clubs can do. I've just taken notes because my brain is going off. I think when it comes to transport, it usually comes down to funding, doesn't it? And I think if speak to us, see if we can support, if we can signpost to funding, if we can support with applying for funding, definitely. I think certainly connecting with the local services in the area, and that's again something that we're really looking to be able to empower clubs to do. So we're hoping to have links and directories with the young care services in the areas that we work in and across the UK, so that if a club goes, where is my local young care service, I can go, this is their email, this is their phone number, this is where they're based, here you go, and really kind of create that network working. I think we're on a more kind of long-term scale, we are looking at some pilot programs where we're supporting clubs to actually do some like targeted focused work alongside their pan disability offers. So when I come back to that club that I mentioned in the summer, where there was a young carer alongside her disabled younger brother, actually, can we, through the events that we run and through the long-term programs that we run, can we include some young carers services within that? So as much as they can attend together, because there is, you know, being a young carer is a wonderful experience, and you do want, you know, it's something that most young carers are really, really proud of, and really, you know, we don't want to take that away. We don't want to eradicate young carers. It's not a bad thing. But actually, can we empower clubs to be able to provide something where they can join together, but also have that time where they can be independent young people as well and take that responsibility away? So long term, that's something that we hope to be able to support clubs to do. But I think talk to us as well, talk to, and hopefully we can connect with those services in the area. They'd be kind of my immediate practical things. There was another hand come up and it's gone.
I think Dan has got his hand up.
Okay.
Everyone's very polite today. I love it.
Thanks. Yeah, so it's been really lovely, like amazing hearing your stories. Thank you so much, Rieta, for sharing. My dad's actually from Sutherland, so right up in the north of Scotland, so I completely understand some of the challenges around sort of transport and getting around there. And funnily enough, actually, the talk of the Rock Challenge, my niece who's based in Dorset, so all the links there, took part in it back when she was younger. So my question really is around, what do you think would be the biggest enabler? So I work for Everyone Active. We run a number of gyms, leisure facilities, sports facilities up and down the country. What do you think would be the biggest enabler in actually helping to support young carers in taking part in some form of physical activity? Because it's that challenge of trying to find that passion for an individual, but we can't put on every single activity that exists to try and help someone. But how do you help someone find that passion, really? I think that's and then enable people to actually take part, because those are the sort of the challenges that I'm sort of thinking at the moment, how we can better support this group.
I know what you mean. As it's kind of even just being able to let them know that there are the opportunities out there for them to try. And that sometimes a lot of young carers might be not afraid of wanting to approach the idea of doing something that interests them, but just unsure of how to necessarily go about it if they see like a club that interests them or a sport that interests them. And with me, obviously, I came from a very rural community, as you kind of know. So there wasn't as many necessary opportunities out there. And one good thing my school actually used to do is do almost like sample days, where instead of necessarily like a sports day or something competitive, they'd have different events, different sports going on. And for that day, you'd almost pick and choose what you could try out, and you'd maybe play a game or two, say netball or go to football, or do like dancing. Our local gymnastics coach, who actually happens to be my cousin, came into the school and helped out with that. Obviously, it's like, again, down to the school in that sense, but even if different sports kind of groups could get together and offer this on like maybe a Saturday or something, it's a potential for them just to see what's out there.
I'll just add to that I completely agree, and I think there's power in, again, connecting with your local young carers service and involving them in that conversation, because they will know, hopefully, about most of the young carers in their kind of area. They'll know what those young people are already doing, and they'll be able to ask them directly, okay, we're now working with Everyone Active. They're going to put on some activities. This is what they've got. What would you like to try first? They can really connect you with those young people. I think also one thing that we're going to try and do at Access Sport is when we put on an event, or, you know, like our Include event, our Ignite event in Bristol, or any events that we do in Manchester, we're going to try and involve the local young carers services so that they can promote that event to young carers, and maybe even involve young carers in the planning of that. but there's also things like young leaders and stuff that we do that we're going to try and include with more of a targeted approach to young carers as well. So I think connecting with the people that are already working with those young carers in the area and involving them if they've got access to really build that people.
Brilliant, thanks. We've just launched a pan disability basketball with James and a local organisation, Next Gen Circle here. So I think if it's possible to do something else with Access Sports and looking at the Young Carers Association, try and get something underway around that. I think James might need to pick up after this to see if there's any scope for that, if that makes sense. Cheers. Thank you so much.
Yeah, let's connect, and obviously if you're already working with James, that's fantastic that you've already connected with the charity, and let's do a bit of research and see who's in your area. Was there another hand that went up? Holly, did your hand go up? Sorry, I can't see the hands, I just see them pop up and then they go away. So
Yeah, the question for Rieta. So at my time, we're looking to create a sort of young care friendly kite mark, in a sense that, for example, we could go deliver some training to Dan at the Everyone Active gyms. They would gain this kite mark that they could like stick in their window or put on their advertising or something like that to show that they are young care aware, they're young care inclusive. Would that, to you, if you saw that mark at, like, I don't know, a club that you wanted to join, or netball or dance, whatever it may be, would that make you more amenable to try that sport because you know that those coaches, those people are aware of what a young carer's status is, what some of the pressures are, that they could make some reasonable adjustments?
Yeah, I think so. You feel more comfortable approaching them and like talking about your situation, being even just like, hi, can I like leave class or like coaching or whatever you want to call it, like 10-20 minutes earlier because I have to do A, B, or C, rather than feeling like they'd necessarily judge you for it. And I think it also help potentially parents who might think they're children or carers, if that makes sense, but not sure how to necessarily approach not getting them identified, but like how the process goes on, knowing that there's someone there that they could also speak to and work together, if that makes sense.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you.
Debbie, your hand is up. I'll come to you next, if that's okay.
Yes, just going back to your sample day where there was lots of different activities. Recently, we had a brilliant Cumbria Day down at Workington Town, and it was organised by the TDA, which is a part of Sellafield, that have lots and lots of money and charitable things that they can give to the community support. And 12 children in 12 local schools, so 144 children all turned up, and they were chosen because they were called ninjas, and it was due to building up their self-esteem. So I know it's not the same as the young carers, but the model worked really well, where we had lots of different sporting activities going on at once. We had wrestling, running, netball, cricket, rugby. We had team building activities, and the children got to choose and go around different activities, and they had a whole day, and they absolutely loved it. So for us, obviously those children were chosen by the schools because they had low self-esteem, lacking in self-confidence at the beginning of the year. You wouldn't have thought that by the group of children that were there at the end of the year. So maybe that could be a model that we could actually use and focus maybe on the young carers in our area when we get to know more about them. So that way, and if we had like the local clubs at the local gym. So if they really like doing all the gym work with the local gym, it wasn't, oh, well, we can't find anyone. Well, actually, this is the guy that's actually going to be doing it for you. So you've already got a face to put with the gym. So when you do go to the gym, you think, oh, that's the guy that was there the other day. So those connections, I think, would be really easy to make. And I personally feel it would be less threatening because you're seeing everybody.
Yeah.
So that's just an idea.
I think that's a fantastic idea, Debbie, and I think that model is like a really what's the word, like low trying to think of the word, like low demanding thing, where there's loads of different opportunities and those young people can come along and as and when they feel they can kind of have a go, because I think you know, we spoke before about the kind of the lack of time, and the increase of responsibilities means you have less time to be able to go and try these things and actually access community sports. So if you can put one thing on all day where people can come and try out lots of different things and find what works for them, then I think that's a really really good opportunity, and then we can signpost them to those clubs. So really good insight. Rhys, do you have anything to add onto that before I ask for any other questions?
Pretty much summed it up, yeah.
Are there any other questions from anybody else? Any hands up or anything in the chat? I'm just like going across to make sure I've not missed any hands. No? Okay, shall I continue sharing the slides, Shanna?
Yeah, go for it. I was going to say, I know we've got a bit of time left and we can kind of finish off the webinar, and I'm thinking if people have questions or if they want to discuss anything else, me and Sarah will be happy to stay on and have any quick catch-ups at the end. So yeah, don't worry about asking questions just now, putting it in the chat. We can stop recording and stay on when we've kind of finished the next couple of slides.
Mm-hmm. So Shanna, I think I'm handing over to you now, aren't I?
You are.
But I've closed all my windows down, so just let me double check that I'm actually sharing the right slide. Can you all see what's next? Is that right?
Can't see your slide.
1 second.
I'll just say a massive thank you to Riata, because that was so great to be able to hear your experience and to hear your insight. And I know there's a fair few clubs and young carers organisations on this call, so I'm sure having your kind of input into the conversation has been so useful. So a massive thank you from myself and Sarah for jumping on.
Thank you for having me along as well. I hoped my words came across. My words came across properly. There we go.
We're brilliant, I promise you. Thanks so much.
Okay, Shanna, I'm going to hand over to you now. Can you see the what's next now?
I can. Yeah, thanks, Sarah. So yeah, I want to say a massive thank you to Sarah as well. Bit of context for you all. Sarah presented this workshop to our staff team at a team day a couple of, maybe like a month ago now. And it really just opened a lot of eyes in the room. I think we all work in community sport and have done for a long time, but I think young carers is quite new to an awful lot of people, and their experiences and their the impact that community sport can have on them is definitely goes unnoticed by a lot of people. So thank you, Sarah, for sharing it again, and hopefully we can continue the work and we can do more young carers webinars in the future for more people.
Definitely.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. If there's any more questions, like I said, stay on the call, pop them in the chat. We'll hang around for another 10 minutes just to have any further conversations if people want them. But, sorry, my Zoom has just gone all bizarre. Okay, we're back. As I mentioned at the start of this webinar, we have hosted this today as part of our Inclusive Club Network. This is the last webinar of the year, and what a great one to end on, if I do say so, not myself, it wasn't me, it was Sarah, but there we go. But we're getting straight back into it in January with a webinar and a forum, which are already in the calendar. So I will share all the details of those in the follow-up email and in the chat just now. I'll pop a wee link so you can all go to our website and see what's coming up. But before I go, I know there's a few clubs on here that may have seen this before, but earlier in the year we launched our Building Stronger Communities research, which was around looking at how community clubs can really foster that sense of belonging for young people, and really how do we quantify the impact that community clubs can have on young people. So we're actually continuing that research now by starting to track the difference community sports clubs can make over a long period of time. We're going to be asking parents, carers, and young people who attend community sports clubs to complete a short survey. It takes less than 5 minutes. It's completely anonymous. And we really just want to hear from as many community sports clubs and participants as possible. So there's a QR code on your screen. If you don't mind scanning that, it'll take you to the survey. You can either do it now or do it at a later date. I'll also send the link in the follow-up email. Once you've taken part in the survey, you'll be entered into a prize draw to win one of 5 Amazon vouchers. If you have any questions around the survey, please drop me an email, but it should be pretty self-explanatory, and it's really just a way for us to expand on that research that we launched earlier in the year, which you can find on our website if you haven't already seen it. But that brings us to the end of today's webinar. Like I said, stay on, we can have a chat, but if not, enjoy the rest of your Tuesday. Thank you so much for joining us today, and we hope you have a lovely rest of your day. Thanks, guys.
Just going to pop that